Hey guys, thanks for joining. Today we're talking about wide receivers, new faces and new places, a lot of movement with the free agency, and we're going to be locking it down for you. We got 8 receivers today we're talking about. If you like this video, please subscribe, like, and share. Let's go! All right. Welcome to the show. This is the Frankly Fantasy Football Podcast. We are your hosts, Frankie and Johnny. Frankie, welcome in, brother. You ready for wrapping up our series, multi-episode series of new faces and new places? That's how you know there's a lot of movement in the free agency in the offseason. We have to have, is it 5 episodes we've had to have now? I think it's 5 episodes. Today is receivers. How you feeling about that?
Oh, so excited. And yeah, how crazy of a series. I mean, to your point, man, it's always like, hey, new NFL draft, a lot of new players on a lot of new positions or new teams based on the draft. This year, man, free agency was wild, especially receivers. So yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm excited to dive in.
There are 8 guys today we're talking about that are receivers alone. And these are 8, there's many, many more, but these are 8 that you will be drafting. I mean, that's how impactful these offseason free agency moves are. It's nuts, man. All right, thank you so much for joining us today, guys. Please don't forget, follow us on social media. Frankie's been tearing up that Instagram and social media. A lot of really good stuff. You've really stepped up your game this year, Frank, I have to admit.
I like to, I dabble. I dabble a little bit, learning some new skills. Maybe AI is helping out a little bit. So yeah, doing a little thing, doing my thing.
I have to say the AI, this is the first application of AI in my real life that I've seen a huge difference just with the social media, the video editing and recording. It's pretty goddamn awesome, man. I'm not going to lie.
It's pretty amazing.
But don't forget to follow us on social media. Everywhere, Frankly Fantasy Football. And guys, please, we know you listen on Spotify. We see the numbers. We see you listening on Apple and Google. Also watch the videos on YouTube. Please subscribe, like, follow on YouTube, guys. Great videos. We're doing these new faces and new places. We did rookie reviews. We've got films of these guys so you can see. Don't just go by our word. We want you to physically see these guys producing fantasy value for you. So check out the YouTube page, Frankly Fantasy Football. All right, man, let's get after it. We've got 8 receivers we're talking about today. New faces, new places, wrapping up the series. Let's get to the first guy here, Frankie, Stefon Diggs. Woo! Okay, this one's interesting. Let's spend a little time on this first guy here. All right, Stefon Diggs, he was a major force in Buffalo, paired up with Josh Allen. Now he got traded to the Houston Texans. Very, very interesting with CJ Stroud and a handful of other weapons here. All right, last year he finished as a wide receiver 10, so pretty decent year for Stefon Diggs. Currently, he's the 18th receiver off the board, going around round 3 or so, early round 3. All right, Frank. Break it down. What's going on with Stefon Diggs?
John, Stefon, this is really, really fascinating because nobody kind of seen this coming. I mean, especially with how he had that synergy with Josh Allen. I mean, obviously there were some issues a little bit here and there, some, big polarizing personalities with that of Diggs and a few others on Buffalo. And sometimes, yeah, they would, knock heads a little bit here and there, but nobody saw a trade like this happening. And before we dive in, John, it was kind of interesting for those that were listening to Josh Allen's most recent, interview after one of the days at camps that he had, and was asked if he missed that of Stefon Diggs. And boy, oh boy, if you did not hear his response, you probably should, because verbatim, his words and not mine, he's not sure if missing Stefon Diggs was actually the right way to phrase it. AKA, hell no, he doesn't miss him at camp. With that crazy ass personality and the big, bold personality that he has, definitely probably misses his talent. Not going to doubt that. But no, so it's very, very interesting, man. I don't know
what that reminds me of, man?
What's that?
You know what that reminds me of? The movie Office Space. when they're sitting in the table with the bobs.
Yes.
And he goes, well, seems like you've been missing quite a bit of work lately. And he goes, I wouldn't say I've been missing it, Bob.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's the answer right there. I wouldn't say we're missing Stefon Diggs.
And I don't think they really are just yet. They might mid-season, John, but very interesting. I digress. Stefon Diggs is no longer a Buffalo Bill. He is now a Texan. John, he was able to sign a little bit of a extension here, 1 year, $2.2 million, which is nice. But what's fascinating is he's going from one superstar quarterback to arguably an up-and-coming superstar with that of CJ Stroud, Buckeye season. Now, he's going to be playing alongside of that of Nico Collins, who had a career year last year. Tank Dell really showed out, especially that rookie being a rookie last year, who would have been insane had he not got hurt at the end of the year. Then obviously, we have also talked about, John, Joe Mixon being a new face in a new place, heading over to that of the Texans as well. So what I'm getting at is this entire Houston offense has pretty much been revamped in a sense in terms of where Nico Collins is now going to play, is going to shift a bit differently. Tank Dell is going to be healthy. Now we're going to have to see how that pans out with Stefon Diggs. Obviously, they re-signed Dalton Schultz, and I just mentioned Joe Mixon. So for me, man, I'm so excited to see what this offense can do. But with that being said, what about the stats? So what Stefon Diggs did last year, John, he had 160 targets. Let's just pause. 160 targets. He ain't going to be seeing that this year. No way. But he had 107 receptions, 1,183 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. Johnny finished as receiver 10, as you mentioned. So really had a damn good year. Now looking into the Houston, it's going to be interesting to see if he can replicate this. I don't think it will be to that level of caliber. I think he'll still potentially be a top 20, top 15-ish type of receiver. But it will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it will be. And you mentioned the 160 targets, which is insane. I was just looking at Nico Collins just to get a little kind of feel for that. Nico Collins had 109 targets last year total. So that's where, we get into the fantasy implications here. And the question's going to be, is there going to be enough targets? Are there going to be enough targets to go around in this offense? And who is it going to get distributed to? So we're looking at fantasy implications of this. You're looking at Stefon Diggs in the 3rd round. How do you go about your strategy if you're looking at Stefon Diggs? Is this a guy you want?
John, that's a good question. Is this a guy that I want? The answer is yes, while also no. And what I mean by this is yes, he has a lot of name value. So if you're drafting him, you can use that piece as a trade piece. You can use him as that name value to sweeten the pot for some sort of deal, whatever it may be. I also like him because if I can also get him as my receiver 2, maybe my receiver 3, if I go 3 receivers in a row, which I've been known to do, especially in a 3-receiver league, right? That's also super interesting. I'm all over that. If he's your receiver 1, that is where we've been used to seeing Diggs for the last few years. That's where it's a hell no. I think with how well Nico Collins played last year, how incredible Tank Dell was, and then them re-signing Dalton Schultz to a longer-term contract, I just think, to your point, man, there's too many mouths to feed for him to even remotely produce what he did last year in terms of a target share perspective.
It's really difficult and it's confusing. And, I think it's going to have to be something we're just going to have to watch throughout camp. We're going to have to watch in the preseason, assuming Stefon Diggs, you see anything out of him, really. Mm-hmm. I would assume you would, because it's CJ Stroud with a young quarterback. It's a revamped offense. I would assume you're going to see some work and we're going to be able to see him out there. But Nico Collins is being drafted ahead of him.
What do you think about that? Yeah, I was going to say,
I think it's nuts. There's no chance I'm touching Nico Collins in the 2nd round.
Crazy.
3rd. It's not happening. I'm not going to anchor my team on Nico Collins, who, shout out to us last year, told every single person, pick up Nico Collins as your last pick. We did. Other people did. And now he's being drafted 2nd, early 3rd round. Just saying, guys. Just saying. Scoreboard, motherfuckers.
John, what's interesting too is Stefon Diggs is ADOT. And for those of you who guys don't know what ADOT is, that's average depth of target, was 7.4 yards. And what's interesting is that we're going to be talking about a few other guys that are a little bit lower on this list in terms of ADP. that actually had a higher ADOT. So it's kind of, Stefon Diggs had a really strange year last year. And, yes, it was good. It wasn't dominant. The first few weeks were dominant. I mean, we go back to understanding, the change from Ken Dorsey to then Joe Brady from an offensive coordinator perspective. That totally was, I think, was the last straw, right? The straw that broke the camel's back in terms of being able to get Diggs the ball. So it's going to be interesting, man. But yeah, I'm excited though to see him in Houston.
I am too. I'm excited to see how it kind of shakes out. But I mean, we have to really temper our expectations with Stefon Diggs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's much more realistic for Stefon Diggs is somewhere around 80 catches and 1,000 yards. I think that's really kind of the ceiling of what we're going to be looking at with Stefon Diggs. So if that's the case, which I believe it will be, if I take him as my wide receiver 2, I am certainly in the next couple of rounds going to go a little heavier with wide receiver. Yeah, because it's a huge risk. We know he's not Amari Cooper. He's not that locker room guy. He's a bit of a prima donna. He's a bit of a pain in the ass, to be perfectly honest.
Yep.
And he could throw a temper tantrum and not get targeted for 2 games, which would destroy you if you're drafting him that high. I like him much better in my flex because I'd like to have some options. But I have to be perfectly honest with you, man. Stefon Diggs is a guy I almost every time skip over in the draft.
Interesting.
And I look at other guys that are around him. I think it's just too volatile. I think he helps the team greatly. But when it comes to fantasy, he's no longer the alpha. He's no longer the target monster who demands and commands targets. So I think it'll be really interesting on how we play that. All right, let's get to the next guy here, Frank. Let's talk a little bit about, this is your boy last year, man. This is your guy right here, man. Yeah, Calvin Ridley. Okay. Now with the Titans. He was with Jacksonville last year. Takes a little travel in the same division here. Goes now playing with the Tennessee Titans. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 18. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 34 off the board. 72 ADP. So you're looking around round 6 or so for Calvin Ridley. All right, lay it out for me, brother.
John, Calvin Ridley, the Riddler, was one of my champions last year. And, he was off to kind of a good start and then died and then came back and he was kind of all over the place. But at the end of the day, the Riddler got paid, baby. He got paid a 4-year, $92 million, $50 million guaranteed for the Titans, which is just shocking, but good for you, man. Get your money when you can. What's interesting, John, is he's going to be playing alongside of that of D-Hop, which is, get healthy, man. We need you to get healthy. That way you're performing at a high rate. For those of you who don't know, D-Hop got a little bit injured in camp. He's looking to be back in a couple weeks, but still definitely a hit to the offense. But with that being said, he'll be playing alongside D-Hop, Treylon Burks, another new face in a new place with that of Tyler Boyd. And then obviously they have Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Chig, right? So, John, this is a really kind of an interesting offense. This is a pretty bolstered offense from what they had last year. Will Levis will be leading the helm. And when you start looking at what Calvin Ridley did for the Jags, John, when we were just talking about the ADOT, right? Let's talk about some stats here. When we were talking about the ADOT with that of Stefon Diggs with a 7.4, the ADOT, the average depth of target for that of Calvin Ridley was 7.5 yards. And Calvin Ridley still was underperforming in comparison to Diggs. So really interesting there. But he ended up having 136 big time target share, 76 receptions, 1,016 yards receiving, and 8 touchdowns. John, you mentioned it when we were just talking about Stefon Diggs. What you think he could probably do, you're basically describing what Calvin Ridley did last year. So that is a really good mindset when you're drafting guys to think about, okay, what did Calvin Ridley do? If you had him, you knew the frustration, you knew some of the issues going on. Don't overspend for that of Stefon Diggs because, to John's point, if he is in that same realm that Calvin Ridley was, then he's absolutely a flex or a low-end receiver too. And that was strictly just because, there wasn't good synergy between him and Trevor Lawrence as well as what everybody thought there was going to be. And in addition, there were a lot of mouths to feed. There was Christian Kirk, there was Zay Jones, there was Evan Ingram, right? Travis Etienne, so on and so forth. So now that Calvin Ridley is on the Titans, man, This is going to be a lot of fun to watch, especially with the way Will Levis just airs it out and throws a lot more 50-50 balls than that of Trevor Lawrence did.
I agree. And that's the one reason why I think Calvin Ridley is intriguing to me. I don't think Will Levis is a great quarterback. I don't. But dude throws the ball down the field.
Yeah.
And we know Calvin Ridley can live in that world. We saw it in Atlanta many years, you know? So that's what makes it exciting for me. I would rather skip over Stefon Diggs and in the third and take Calvin Ridley in the sixth and use that as a flex option. Because I think he can give you, it wasn't the sexiest. He would disappear for a couple of games, then he'd have a 2-touchdown game, really, skewed his numbers a bit. So he finished at 18, but he was really a low-end wide receiver 2 flex option,
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly where he's going to be again. He's not, I don't think we're overpaying for him. I think Calvin Ridley is exactly where he should be, and that gives him some room to overperform a bit. Because I think he can be a very solid wide receiver 2, middle ground, low-end wide receiver 2. So drafting him in the 6th round, I think it's great. I think that's right where you want it to be. You can play him as your wide receiver 2 if you need to. You can throw him in at flex. You can use him and a couple of other guys as options as flex. But I like him a lot more because of the price tag and because that's probably his floor.
Yeah.
Where he performed last year is probably his floor. It's probably very similar to where he's going to perform this year. Having D-Hop opposite him, I do like that.
Yeah.
He's going to be a little banged up, which is also kind of good because they're going to have to feature Calvin Ridley a little earlier in the year, which means he could be getting more targets the first couple of games of the year, which also means you could have some trade bait. If you're drafting him in the 6th round, you're likely not relying on him, so you could move him early in the season. So keep that in mind. What do you think about Calvin Ridley when you're staring at him in the draft?
Oh, I'm definitely taking him. And it's not because I have a bias from last year or anything. It's exactly what you said. I think the value is there. The value matches where you're going to be able to take him. It's not like you're reaching. A good example, it's not Nico Collins this year. That's the difference, John. That's a really good comp. You're not reaching for Nico due to what he did last year. You're letting Calvin Ridley come to you based on what he did. Big difference. The other key call out is that when looking at Stefon Diggs and Calvin Ridley, I want to make one more comparison here. Stefon Diggs finished as receiver 10 in half PPR, right? Roughly about 224 points, right? Give or take a few, depending on how your league's set up. Calvin Ridley was receiver 18 with 196. So we're talking less than 30 points between the number 10 and the number 18. Guys, that's not a lot. That's one game. That's one Tyreek Hill game. That's one Justin Jefferson game. That's one Puka game, right? At this point. And so there's not, to your point, John, and it just breathes the way it's the reason why I say what I'm saying and the way I'm saying it is because it adds to, are you willing to take that of Stefon Diggs or wait to that of Calvin Ridley? And what is the difference between the two in terms of value? I think Calvin Ridley's is much higher in that sense when you compare those particular statistics.
It's very important. It doesn't matter if we like the guy. It depends on how much you're paying for the guy.
That's right.
That's going to make the whole decision for you. Okay, next guy. We're looking right down the ADP list. These next couple are all bunched together here, man. All right, new face, new place, Hollywood Brown, man. Hollywood, leaving the Cardinals, heading over to the Chiefs. Okay, we got to talk about this guy for a minute because I go back and forth, Frankie, from loving him to being totally terrified by him. So let's look at this here. Last year, he finished as a wide receiver 52. A lot of issues last year, a lot of health issues as well. Currently being drafted as the wide receiver 37. And we've got Rashee Rice right ahead of him at 36, just to be clear. Looking right around late 6th, early 7th round draft. All right, Frank, lay it out for us. How does Hollywood look this year?
I mean, John, Kansas City, I want a piece. I want a little piece of that pie. 1 year, $7 million deal, 6.5 guaranteed. Basically no risk for the Chiefs here. He's playing alongside of Pitty Pat Mahomes. We got Isaiah Pacheco, CEH, Kelsey, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Kadarius Toney, who, by the way, he's taking some reps at running back, which is kind of interesting. So there's a lot going on here with a lot of unproven players in terms of the Chiefs. Not a lot of staples. Yes, Rashee Rice, we could kind of say he was a staple, but with a lot of the off the field shit that he's had going on, he's definitely going to be facing a suspension. Like, it's not if, it's when. So then you got to prepare for that. So, John, when we're looking at Hollywood Brown and what he did even last year, talking about some stats, again, average depth of target, the ADOT, 5.7 yards, not super great when you're looking at, a PPR or a half PPR or better yet, even a standard when receptions don't even matter. So you want the average depth of target to be way higher than 5.7. Now, to your point, John, Kyler Murray was hurt, right? The Cardinals were an absolute shitstorm dumpster fire, right? Last year, it was what it was. The saving grace was really that of Trey McBride and that of James Conner towards the end of the year. Other than that, it was really, really tough. But what's fascinating is he still had 101 targets, 51 receptions, over 500 yards, almost pushing 600 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So even with the limited amount of play that he had, he still kind of flashed in certain aspects. And so for me, man, that's why I'm interested in him this year. And you mentioned his ADP is 78. I mean, in a 10-man league, you're saying that's back half of the 7 or early 8. In a 12-man league, you're looking early part of the 7th round, maybe back half of 6. That's kind of sexy because, right, you're only going to see production go up, assuming there's no injury to him, right? The Patrick Mahomes is going to throw the ball much more than what Kyler Murray did and some of those other cats that were backups for Kyler. So I think, right, maybe I'm wrong, but I think even Colt McCoy was throwing a few passes over the last few years for the Cardinals. Like, God bless him. So long story short, man, I definitely want a piece of the pie here with Hollywood Brown, especially with him coming over here. There's no risk to the Chiefs. If I'm the Chiefs, man, I want to see him sprint down the field, do some calisthenics, get some workout in, right? And then I think he's going to get the ball. He's a much, much better version of what we'll see from, or what we saw from MVS. So that's where I'm kind of leaning towards, the deep threat. I think his average depth of target is going to go way up, man, with Patrick Mahomes, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that was when you were reading off the ADOT, I mean, it's obvious that he wasn't healthy last year. He played up until the last 3 or 4 games, I think, but he was banged up and injured. When Hollywood Brown's average depth of target is 5 yards, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with him, My concern, yes, I want a piece. Every year we do this.
We do
All right.
this every year.
Who are Patrick Mahomes receivers? I want a piece of it. Do I want a big piece? No, that's too big of a piece. I'm going to take a little piece over here and take one of these guys. Yeah, take a little piece towards the 7th, 8th round. That's what I'm looking at, man. But yeah, I want a piece of it. And until they drafted Xavier Worthy, I was all over Hollywood Brown. Now they bring in Xavier Worthy. This dude's running a fucking sub 4.2. Jesus, man.
Just about,
I mean, it makes Hollywood Brown look like a goddamn minivan.
Crazy.
4.21. Jesus, man. Crazy. But so that gets me a little less excited, especially when I see reports from camp of Xavier Worthy working out with Mahomes and just dropping bombs on him. I mean, that makes me excited. So yes, Xavier Worthy's a guy I'm absolutely targeting. Hollywood Brown is a guy that if I can't get Worthy, I don't have any other pieces on that offense, I will take a flyer on him because I do want a piece of this offense. Now, try to convince me otherwise. I am concerned that Hollywood Brown, this is perfect place for him to fit into. I'm worried he's just going to be doing cardio out there like fucking Sky Moore and MVS. Please convince me otherwise.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a good question. And John, here's the reality of the situation is that he's a better player. He's a way better player than those guys ever could be and ever were. It was shown at the Ravens. It was shown in his first year with the Cardinals. He showed that he can truly be a receiver one. And I go back more towards the Ravens on that. We've seen it. Now, you layer on, he had Lamar Jackson, and what we saw was super fun. And then obviously when he went to the Cardinals and all the shit that kind of happened, yeah, he kind of fell off. But now that he is Patrick Mahomes, I just think it's different. I think he's different than Sky Moore. I think he's different than MVS. I think he's a bit, right? He's not as young as that of Sky Moore, but he's younger than that of an MVS. And so for me, man, I think that, yeah, I can't guarantee it. That's the shitty part. That's the shitty part is that we've seen this with the Chiefs receivers. But to your point, I want a piece. I want a piece, and it's worth stashing just a little crumb, just a little fucking crumb from Pitty Pat's Pies right? And I want that on our side, and I want a little piece of that, man. So I can't guarantee it, and I fucking want to, but I want a piece of the pie.
I think I saw a video on Brazzers or Pornhub called Pity Pat's Pies, if I remember correctly. It sounds... Don't worry, we got the explicit tag. It's fine.
Come on.
Pity Pat, this episode brought to you by Pity Pat's Pies.
Pity Pat's Pies, get you a crumb. Come on in.
Come on, get a piece of Pity Pat's Pies. Yeah, that's my concern with him, man, is that it's a guy, yes, I will draft. He'll be in the mix of 2 or 3 guys I'm looking to put into my flex or play in my second flex. I like that because there is upside there. He's going to catch some bombs.
Yeah.
It is going to happen. I don't know what the consistency is going to look like, but he's going to be catching some bombs from Patrick Mahomes. And also, how dare you bring up Kadarius Toney's name? Don't you fit him into this podcast.
Oh.
We're not talking about Kadarius. I don't want it. How dare you? Don't make me Greta Thunberg your ass right now. How dare you talk about Kadarius Toney?
God, what a shitstorm that guy was last year. Ugh.
All right, let's move on here. Let's get to the next guy, Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson, new face, new place, wide receiver, came from Pittsburgh, now with the Carolina Panthers. Last year, he finished as wide receiver 44. Currently being drafted as a wide receiver 38 off the board, roughly around the 7th round. Again, you've got Diontae Johnson, Hollywood Brown, Calvin Ridley, basically all back-to-back. Once you run through your stuff here, Frank, I'm going to ask you which of these guys you're going to take. We'll do a little mini would you rather here. But why don't you lay out just Diontae Johnson for us, buddy?
For those of you who don't know, Panthers had a big trade for Diontae Johnson. They ended up trading one of their cornerbacks to that of the Steelers for a player-for-player trade. Very fun to see that happen. You rarely see that. Usually there's picks involved, something like that, but it was pretty cool to see a 1-for-1. With that being said, he signed a 2-year extension. So he is 2-year, $36.7 million extension. My boy got paid from playing at the MAC in Toledo. Love to see it, Diontae. But here's what's interesting, John. He's playing alongside of that of Adam Thielen. They just drafted Xavier Leggett from that of South Carolina, who is a very interesting rookie. They have Jonathan Mingo, which, fun fact, just recently, apparently, he was listed as a starter on the depth chart. So keep that in your back pocket, folks. See what happens from that standpoint. But then they also have Jonathan Brooks, Chuba Hubbard, so on and so forth. Let me be crystal clear when I say this. Diontae Johnson is the guy. He's the guy at the Carolina Panthers. He is receiver 1, and what you are seeing at camp is nothing short of impressive shit from Bryce Young to Diontae Johnson. If you guys get a chance, check out some of the highlights from camp. Bryce Young looks completely different, man. And then Diontae Johnson, he's still dropping a ball here and there, but my God, is his route running incredible. And Bryce Young is putting it on the dot. So what's interesting in talking about dots, let's go to a dot. His average depth of target, John, in terms of his stats here, here's the difference, was 8.2 yards. 8.2, right? Hollywood Brown is, what did we say, 5.7? 5.7? Yeah. That's insane. That's so crazy. So that's for those in standard leagues, half PPR leagues, you should be all over Diontae Johnson. And then you layer on, well, receptions, targets, so on and so forth. Guys, you got to remember how bad Pittsburgh's quarterback play was last year. He had still 87 targets, 51 receptions, 717 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So he didn't have that terrible of a season. Sure, it wasn't a 1,000-yard season, but there were a lot of other factors at play. I mean, to the point to where, John, Kenny Pickett is literally, I think he's honest to God, not even going to be QB2. He's going to be QB3 this year behind a rookie. And so when you start layering in some of this other additional information, rather than just looking at a stat on a screen and saying, oh yeah, that dude's kind of washed or he's average, there's so much more to that. So for me, man, I love Diontae Johnson this year.
I'm really warming up to Diontae Johnson. And one of the main reasons is we saw what Adam Thielen did last year.
Yeah.
This Carolina team was miserable last year. Their offensive line sucked. Bryce Young just got killed and really couldn't do much behind, in the backfield, in the pocket. That's going to be a little bit improved this year for sure, but there's more receiving options. And Diontae Johnson, very similar style, actually, that with Adam Thielen. That medium route, really good route running, back of the end zone kind of guy as well. So I think Diontae Johnson steps right into that and has one of the best seasons he's ever had. I really do. If you can get that much volume on a team like that to Adam Thielen and get that kind of production out of Adam Thielen, Diontae Johnson's going to do very well. I think this offense will run through Diontae Johnson.
Totally.
He's going to be the guy they look to when they need to get the ball into somebody's hands. There's a lot of excitement as well with Jonathan Mingo, with Leggett, the rookie.
Yep.
So having some young talent around him, I love that. But I think Diontae Johnson's going to be the guy doing those quick slants, doing those out routes in the middle of the field, those medium to, long range shots like that. Again, his ADOT was over 8. If he can continue that, I think that's going to look really good. Diontae Johnson is definitely a guy I want in my flex.
Yes.
As much as possible. I feel great about it. It's not a guy that you have to worry about being a boom or bust guy. I think he's going to be very consistent. I don't see a reason why he couldn't get to 1,000 yards this year as well and have around 80 receptions or so.
John, you asked me, okay, who will you pick between, let's just say, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and I'm even going to throw in Calvin Ridley. It's Diontae Johnson for me. I just think that with how bad the defense could be for Carolina Panthers, they lost Brian Burns. Don't forget about that, right? I think that they're going to have to throw the ball much more than they have before. I think that with them also adding other pieces and the way Adam Thielen performed, I don't think that they're going to be able to truly double team him as much, especially with them adding Jonathan Brooks, who if he comes back healthy, he's going to miss a couple weeks, I would assume, due to his injury last year, right? He tore his ACL, for those of you who don't know, in that of November when he was playing for Texas. He's the rookie who came in. And John, I think that that's going to open up the door to where, to your point, man, last year, the defenses were teeing off on Bryce Young. He could barely get the ball off in time. It was sad to watch. And then he's getting criticized because of his shit play. And it's so ass backwards. If you guys look at what he did at Alabama, you'll check your shit real quick. So for me, man, I think that with Diontae Johnson bringing it full circle, I'm choosing Diontae over all of those guys. Not only because I think he's going to be the guy, but I also love his value. Even when you compare him to Calvin Ridley, who would be my number 2 between those guys that we had listed. Calvin Ridley, again, 72 ADP, where you can get Diontae Johnson at 80. That's almost a round difference in a 10-man league, and that's a big deal. So you could truly go almost both of those guys if you would like, but it's the value you can get with Diontae on top of him truly being a receiver one in a revamped offense with a brand new head coach and a brand new system. I'm all on board, man. I'm pulling that hype train all day long. Give me a piece of Diontae Johnson.
I think we both agree. When we're ranking the 3 of those guys, it's going to be Diontae Johnson first, Calvin Ridley second, Hollywood Brown third.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, what that means, guys, if you're on one of the turns in your draft and you're looking at, you've got a pick, but then there's going to be 4 picks in front of you to your next pick. Those 3 guys are still there. You can wait, is what that means, is that you can let everybody else, you can take another need you have there, and then it comes back around. You can grab Diontae Johnson and let the other guys take Hollywood Brown and Calvin Ridley. So something to think about. It gives you an option of a tier where you can wait to the end of that tier to get another guy. You're basically getting another pick then at that. Okay, moving on here, Frank, moving on. Next guy, we've got Curtis, my man.
Yeah.
Curtis Samuel. All right, now with the Buffalo Bills, and maybe stepping into the wide receiver 1 spot, perhaps, with the Bills. Last year, he finished wide receiver 45. This year, currently being drafted as a wide receiver 50, off the board, way out until the 117th in ADP. Frank, lay out Curtis Samuel for us. I don't think he's on a lot of people's radars. Why don't you put him on it?
He should be. He should be, guys. We're ringing the bell here. It's not necessarily a true Nico Collins situation as last year, right? But
wait a minute. Is that how you ring a bell?
Yeah, because dude.
No, the best is the video of the college guy ringing the bell, and he's ringing it. He's ringing it like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So every time I ring the bell, I'm going to be, I'm gonna make a fucking face and get after it, dude. So I'm ringing the bell on Curtis Samuel over here. John, he signed a 3-year, $24 million deal, $15 million guaranteed. Holy shit, what a deal for that of Curtis Samuel, man. He's playing alongside of that of James Cook, Keon Coleman with some swag, who is their rookie receiver that they drafted out of Florida State, who is going to be or should be really solid as well. You have Khalil Shakur, Dalton Kincaid, and Dawson Knox as well. So the players that I just listed, there's not a lot of top tier guys just yet outside of potentially Dalton Kincaid. So for me, man, I'm all about Curtis Samuel. This guy is such a Swiss Army knife in the way he was used not only for the Buckeyes, but also used for the Washington Commanders. He ended up having, John, looking at some of these stats here, his average depth of target was 6.7, which was really, really solid. And you guys are going to be like, well, you just said 7 is bad, right? Well, yeah, for Stefon Diggs and stuff like that. But for Curtis Samuel, who's running flares out of the backfield, who's doing reverses, who's also getting more mesh routes, things like that, it's a bit different of a style of play. So 6.7 still isn't that terrible for him. In addition, Johnny had 91 targets, 62 receptions, 613 yards, and 4 touchdowns. As you mentioned, finished receiver 45. That's not nothing. So then that was also with Sam Howell on a terrible offense, and he also had a shit ton of receiver competition between that of Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, right, and a few of the other guys. So for me, man, I really think this is a diamond in the rough. If I am looking at him and he is there, and at ADP 117, which is what, round 12, round 13, round 11-ish, around there, like, yeah, man, I'm all about it, and I am absolutely targeting and drafting him in every possible league I possibly can.
All right, let's just look at simple math. I mean, this is just kind of what I'm looking at here. Stefon Diggs, we just talked about it, had 160 targets, 160 goddamn targets. Gabe Davis, also not there anymore. We're going to get to him in a second. 81 targets, man. So that's a lot of targets to pass around, and you've got Khalil Shakir had 45 targets. Now, his target share may go up, obviously, because there's so many vacated targets. But 160 targets, 80 targets, and you've got Keon Coleman, and you've got Curtis Samuel. That's a lot of fucking targets to go around, man.
A lot.
It really is. I would imagine that you're going to have James Cook target share go up.
Yeah.
You're going to see 2 tight end sets, I'm sure, much more often with Kincaid and Knox on the field. But it's still a lot of receiving targets. I mean, it almost seems impossible that Curtis Samuel doesn't come close to 100 targets. It seems impossible that wouldn't be the case. So I think that's great, man. I think he's being slept on. Not a sexy pick,
No.
but it's a guy that is a sure, slow, and steady guy when it comes to production. May not have those 3 touchdown games, but I think he's going to get you there. I think he's very, very sneaky, and I think he's very safe just because of the sheer number of targets that have to go somewhere. And if he's healthy on the field, he's going to get a big portion of those targets. Love putting him in as my flex.
John, I think I could see Curtis Samuel's ceiling being somewhere to that of Tyler Lockett. That very, very similar in terms of fantasy output and production. Again, I don't know if he'll get there this year to that level of what Tyler Lockett has been performing. But again, when talent meets opportunity, quote Johnny Hickey over here, that is exactly what Curtis Samuel has. And later on, a quarterback, John, that's not even close to anything he's ever played with. Ever. We're talking Josh Allen is leaps and bounds above everything else, let alone them knowing that Josh Allen has the run threat. Let them know that James Cook, to your point, is going to be another badass there. Or maybe it's Ray Davis that takes away some of the packages, whatever it may be. What I'm getting at is it's going to open up different ways to get Curtis Samuel the ball. So for me, man, I love this dude, and there's not a lot of other guys that have the ability to get the ball like what he can in this team.
You know who I think is a sneaky comparison here with
Who's
Curtis
that?
Samuel? Last year's Adam Thielen. We just talked about it. It's a team that, a new face in a new place, a receiver on a new team with a new quarterback, and not a lot of receiving options around them. We weren't sure where the target share was going to go. Very similar. I think he's a veteran receiver that could end up having a sneaky late in his career breakout.
Sure.
You know?
Very
Yeah.
well could be.
When it comes to this receiving core, I want either Keon Coleman
Yeah.
or Curtis Samuel. I want one of the two of those guys for the sheer sake of volume of targets. Somebody's getting them. Somebody's going to be scoring on this team. You've got the number one fantasy quarterback in fantasy football. Throw him to him. He's drafted number one overall. I don't think it's that close. So, yeah, that's where I stand with him. Okay, let's move on here. We got Big Mike Williams was with the Chargers, now signed with the Jets. He's going to go see if he can catch a bunch of touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers, huh?
Yeah.
All right, last year, crazy season for him last year. Ended up getting hurt. Ended up finishing wide receiver 113. Currently being drafted the 54th receiver off the board, 122 in ADP. Basically free for you. Frankie, lay us out to Mike Williams.
Mike Williams is one of those ones, John. And by the way, I think he's actually officially off the PUP, which is huge for him to be able to get back on that field. So that's exciting, first and foremost. But what's interesting about Mike Williams is he did only sign a one-year contract, $10 million, 8.3 guaranteed, and who he's playing alongside. You mentioned A-Rod, of course, but Garrett Wilson, they drafted Malachi Corley, they have Tyler Conklin, they have Breece Hall. They have Braylon Allen, who could be very interesting as a Breece Hall handcuff. Just keep that in your back pocket. But so what that means is John, this is tough because Mike Williams, we saw the sample size that we had last year. And dude, he was pretty damn good for the 2 games that we saw him or the 3 games that we saw him. I mean, he almost averaged 100 yards a game and then he got hurt and was out for season. So to have a level of play like that with an Aaron Rodgers is super enticing. But what's also different is that he's a completely different receiver than the other receivers that they have, right? Garrett Wilson is absolutely a PPR machine. He's truly the number one. Dude is a superstar in the making. That's the guy. But then you also have Mike Williams. You have Alan Lazard. You have that of Malachi Corley. You have some of these other cats there. And none of them are as big or have the same frame like that of Mike Williams. Now, Malachi Corley is also pretty big. Like, I don't want to take anything away from him, but Mike Williams is just different, right? And we've seen him perform at an extremely high level with that of the Chargers. So for me, man, when we start looking at, okay, the data behind this, one stat really sticks out. And that's the reason why we put this stat here. It's the ADOT, the average depth of target, 9.6 yards. 9.6 yards. Why that's important is because you know that he is getting the ball every time he touches it is basically a point in a standard football league, right? Or a standard fantasy football league, right? To where 10 yards equals 1 point. John, every single time he's catching it, it's basically a point from a yardage perspective, let alone if you're doing a PPR or a half PPR type of league. So that's really sexy when you start thinking about that. And then you start looking at, okay, he had 43 points last year in 3 games. Okay, fantasy points. He had 26 targets in 3 games. That's interesting. Don't gloss over that. 19 receptions, 249 yards and a touchdown. So dude was performing through 3 games. So for me, man, I think that you should absolutely look to take a flyer on him. I think that if we're comparing Mike Williams versus Curtis Samuel, I'm going Curtis Samuel before I'm drafting Mike Williams just because of the opportunity to be a number 1 or a 1A versus or a 1B type of thing, rather than Mike Williams truly is the number 2 or number 3 in this offense as a whole. So it's definitely interesting. Definitely take a flyer on him, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do within this Jets offense.
It's not an unusual situation for him either. I mean, he's used to having a prolific quarterback with another receiver who's also a superstar.
Yep.
So, you can't say there's not enough mouths to feed or there's too many mouths to feed. Also with a dynamic pass-catching running back.
Yeah.
He's had that with Austin Eckler. So he's been in a similar situation to this. So it doesn't scare me that he's got so much talent around him because Mike Williams has done that before. I think it's good. What scares me is that he could be a very slow start because of his injury last year, just adapting to a new team and not being healthy with them, early on. But I think it's definitely worth a flyer. There's no reason he isn't catching touchdowns in the back of the end zone from Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers loves that big target in the corner of the end zone, drop a fade as soon as he hikes the ball. He loves that kind of stuff. So it could be a very, very sneaky play. I'm not scared of him.
Yeah.
Where you're drafting him, there's zero risk.
Zero.
Take the upside, baby. All right, let's move on here, Frankie. We got Jerry Jeudy now with the Browns, leaving a shit situation in Denver. Jerry Jeudy signing with the Browns. Last year, he finished as a wide receiver 50, currently being drafted as the wide receiver 56, late in the draft, 134th in ADP. What can we expect from Jerry Jeudy?
Guys, this is super exciting if you're a Browns fan, and really out there if you're not. Because a lot of people, and the reason why I'm saying this is he signed a 3-year, $53 million deal and a $41 million guaranteed. Now, breaking this down for a second, guys, Andrew Berry did this because of how ridiculous he kind of saw the receiver market getting. So for me, I loved him going out and getting his guy. For those of you who don't know that aren't Browns fans as well, this was a dude that Andrew Berry actually wanted to draft in the first place out of Alabama, and we just couldn't make it happen. So now he got his opportunity with that of Jerry Jeudy this time, who will be playing alongside of that of Coop. We got Elijah Moore and Njoku, big old Chubb, and that of Jerome Ford. So, John, I really like him being that true receiver 2 on a particular team. And then let's talk about some of the stats here. So you have his ADOT, so his average depth of target, was actually decent last year, 8.7 yards. And then when you start looking about, okay, well, what did he actually do in terms of production? Because he was on a shit team, right? It did not work out in Denver. Well, he still had 87 targets, still had 54 yards receiving, almost 54 receptions, almost 800 yards, receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. And so that was with a kind of a convoluted receiver room. That was with a decimated, like truly team. Like they were just confused. I mean, Russell Wilson was actually playing decent. And then he ends up getting shit canned and getting told to sit there and stay on the sidelines. And there comes Jared Stidham. Thank God. No wonder why Jerry Jeudy didn't perform, right? And so for me, man, there's so many other different things that occurred rather than just being like, oh yeah, dude was a bust, right? Because he's a first round draft pick, whatever it may be. So for me, man, I think he's walking into a very good situation with the Browns in an offense that with Deshaun Watson, we're starting to see that synergy build big time in camp. I mean, there are some catches, Jerry Jeudy, there's one, if you guys are interested, is one of him literally on the sideline, perfect teardrop, right in the basket, and he's diving for it and makes an amazing catch. These are things that Jerry Jeudy has the capability to do from a true NFL perspective. And so when we talk about fantasy, I'm excited to see his target share. Probably, John, I could probably see it being similar to honestly what he had around Denver, maybe a little bit more, but I definitely see the yardage going up. I definitely see the touchdowns not being 2. I see that being 5+, and then certainly the receptions going up as well.
I think he's going to have a better year, no question about it. I think he's a lot better for the Browns than he will be for fantasy football.
Yeah, I agree.
It's going to be a guy you're going to pick up and use as depth. And I don't know that he's going to have a ton of value unless Cooper gets hurt. Mm-hmm. If Coop misses a game or two or misses a few games, then his value shoots way up because he is immediately going to be the one, assuming Deshaun Watson can be Deshaun Watson. Again, we've got that to deal with as well. But yeah, I mean, not a guy we have to go over a ton. It's a guy, get him on your bench, put him on there. You don't have to start him. If Coop misses a couple of games, you've got a trade piece. You've got a guy that you can plug right in as a wide receiver 2 or a flex spot and feel good about it. Okay. All right, last guy here, Frank. Let's get to Gabe the Babe Davis. Leaving, we just talked about him, leaving the Buffalo Bills. He's now with the Jags. All right, last year ended up finishing as the wide receiver 40 and currently being drafted as the wide receiver 57, basically going free for you. So he's kind of in that Nico Collins of last year draft pick here. What do you feel about Gabe Davis? What's going on here?
John, we've seen it. He's the ultimate boom bust. He is the definition of boom bust here. He's with the Jags, signed a 3-year, dude got paid, signed a 3-year, $39 million contract, $24 million guaranteed. And it's because of his speed, his ability to take the top off the defense, and also he is proven to be able to catch the ball, which is a huge deal when you're throwing it deep like that. So for me, man, what does the situation look like? Well, he's replacing Calvin Ridley, which is interesting. So there's a lot of vacated targets there, but He's walking into a situation to where they also have Christian Kirk, they have Evan Ingram, and they drafted a badass rookie in that of Brian Thomas Jr. So he is now walking into a very similar situation, in my opinion, as what he was at that of the Buffalo Bills, meaning there's a lot of mouths to feed. You're not really sure what's going to happen. Very similar to a boom bust, right, type of ordeal. And I see that kind of playing out again. John, what's really cool and really interesting to see, again, going back to the ADOT, average depth of target, 9.2 yards. I mean, if that just doesn't scream like deep threat, incredible, get him the ball down, like down the field, amazing. And what's really interesting, he's averaging the most yards per reception, John, since 2020 with a minimum of 150 receptions. Think about what I just said. He's averaging the most per reception since 2020. So that truly, in my opinion, is the definition of a boom or could be a bust if he is not getting the ball. So yeah, man, I mean, what did he do last year? 81 targets, 45 receptions, 746 yards receiving, and that of 7 touchdowns, finished, as you mentioned, receiver 40. So I think it's going to be pretty cool to see what he does for the Jags and see if Trevor Lawrence can continue that streak for that of Gabe Davis and catching those long balls.
Listen, there's two people in the world. There's people who like Gabe Davis and like to have him on his team.
That's right.
And then there's people who don't. I'm on the people who don't. I just don't. I'm not a guy who typically likes to draft unless you're in a best ball situation. You're doing a best ball league, Gabe Davis all day long, baby.
Yeah.
Because you know he's going to have those games. He disappears for 4 games and then scores 2 touchdowns the very next week with 150 yards. I don't like that on my team. It's super annoying also looking at your opponent having Gabe Davis, because then you look at his game log and you're like, oh, fuck. He hasn't done anything in 4 weeks. That means he's going to score twice on me today. Yeah. But I just don't like that on my teams. I don't like having, big boom bust guys out there like that. So it's a guy that if you like that, if you've had Gabe Davis in the past and you enjoy having him, you do. I know you do.
I draft him every year, John. I do, because to your point, here's why I like it. And I want to give the other perspective. I totally see yours, but for the viewers and listeners, here's why I like it. Because if there's injuries that happen, you have a chance. You have a chance, right? And so, yes, it's miserable. And yes, it pisses you off when he's on your bench. But the other thing I did last year, John, was when he actually had a couple of those boom games, I think there was like 2 within like 4 games or something like that, I offloaded his ass and I traded him right before. So you can, depending on strategically, when you have a player like that of Gabe Davis, if he does go off, don't sit. Try to offload that. Try to get somebody who maybe had a receiver go down or needs a flex piece or something like that. Maybe needs a little bit of depth, because like in a great situation would be trade up for a tight end, right? You don't need to go anything crazy, but package together Gabe Davis and another receiver 2 or receiver 3 and get you a top tier tight end. I'm not talking about the top 4 or 5, but I'm talking like maybe a Kyle Pitts. I'm talking maybe a Dallas Goedert, maybe somebody like that, to where you now solidify your tight end room a bit more. So that's why I liked it, Gabe Davis. But to your point, man, it's fucking miserable watching him on your bench and having 0 or 25, you know?
You're never going to start him in the right week. That's all I'm going to say.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That is the conclusion of our New Faces in New Places series. Wow, 5-episode series. All right. I think we got some good information out there, though, Frank.
I think so.
What do we have coming up? What's happening now?
Yeah, guys, check it out. We're going to be diving into another mock draft. So get ready. We're going to be showing you a couple different strategies, and shout out to those who are A, giving me shit. I love it. Keep bringing it on. Secondly, thank you guys. Thank you guys for checking out the mock drafts, giving us feedback, telling us, hey, we really appreciate this type of strategy. Could you guys try this type of strategy next time? Keep them coming. Get the comments going. We'll be happy to test out a bunch of different things for you. But with that being said, don't miss out. We're tuning in for a new mock draft, and we're going to be getting, John, we're slowly inching closer and closer to our champions episode, which, guys, you know what's coming if we're talking champions.
That's right, man. You know, you gave us a 6 in the last little that you did. Why don't you give me a 9 right now?
Oh, that was a 10. That was a fucking 10. Like, John, like, take it to the bank.
That's not bad. I like it. I'll give you an 8.5 on that. I've seen better. We're sober.
We're sober. Yeah.
May the fantasy gods smile upon you. Bye.